going to be looking at career planning and essentially how you can go about setting your career goals. Now, quite often when we're looking towards our career goals, you might have a bit of a clear picture on the type of job that you want, or you might have no idea just yet. You've just kind of moved into a new role. So what I'm going to ask you to do firstly is just take a moment to think about what it is you want from your career. So what are your goals? So this can be a short-term goal, or this can be a long-term goal. But for the sake of today, I just want you to pick one, okay, so we can work on that one as we go through the session. So it could be that, for example, you're looking at professional qualifications, or you've got a certain job title you're working towards. Maybe you're hoping to build out your exposure or your network at the moment, or become a subject matter expert in your field. So whichever the goal is for you, just take a moment to think about what that is. And if you can, jot it down on pen and paper. I'm going to give you a few things to think about with pen and paper today so you can work through that. Now, one of the things we're going to sort of take a look at is essentially, once we have this goal, what do we do with it? So identifying our goals in itself can be a bit of a challenge, because we might have them kind of handed to us. So those of you in more of a kind of proverbial career ladder, where you kind of go from underwriter assistant, assistant underwriter, underwriter, you might be kind of working your way up that process. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're your goals, so they're the thing that you're kind of working towards, but not necessarily the thing that's getting you job satisfaction as you progress up it. So it might be that you're looking to get more clarity over what you want to do with your career, where you want that to go. Or you might just have something that you're working on right here and now. So you might have a challenge that you're facing at the moment, something that you're looking to talk to somebody about, that you're looking for some advice on. So whichever that goal is for you, if you can jot that down. So what I'm going to ask you now is some coaching questions as we go through that goal. So you can think about the answer to these and jot them down for yourself. We're going to try and work out a little bit of an action plan as to how we're going to work towards that goal through these coaching questions. So you've written down your goal, hopefully, by this stage. How will you know when you've achieved your goal? So if you can write that down, what's the answer to that for you? How will you know when you've achieved it? How are you going to feel when you've achieved that goal? So if we take that goal, what action can you take this week? So what instant action can you take that's going to help you move towards that goal? Ignoring all barriers at the moment, what action could you take? What's likely to stop you from taking that action? What's likely to stop you taking that action? On that particular one, when we get to the question section, do send me that one if you're struggling to come up with the solutions I'm going to put to you now. So how can you overcome that barrier? So how can you overcome whatever might stop you from working towards that goal? And if that's a view with a 1 week look on it, so we're looking very short term, how can you look at that with a longer term view? So what action can you take longer term that's going to help you work towards that goal? And what might get in the way of that? Okay, so we've got an idea of the goal, and we've got the action, we've got some barriers we're going to take a look at. But if we've got the actions, how can you plan that in? So how can you plan that in to make sure that you're going to be able to work towards it? This might be finding some time in your diary, it might be asking for some support, some resources, some training, some mentoring. Okay, so how are you going to plan that in to make sure you do it? And on that one, what I'd like you to do right now is open up your diary. So open up your work diary, ideally for just this week, focus on this week, and find some time in your diary where you can plot and allocate time to take those actions. I imagine for a good few of you, when you're talking about what the barriers are, time is often one of them. So we're always going to be really busy doing our jobs, and there's always going to be more and more work coming towards us with our job. That's stuff that's urgent. And some of it's important, some of it's less important, but it's all urgent. When it comes to you and your career, the stuff that you're writing down on that list is no doubt important, but it's probably not urgent. So it's the type of thing that if you didn't do this week, you could put it off till next week, or you can even put it off to the summer. It's only going to impact you, so you can put it off. And unfortunately, that means we do put it off. The reason I say unfortunately is because it is the most important bit, and that's where the value is going to come. So what I want you to do is find that time in your diary to plan in your action and make sure it happens. So we're going to treat this like a non-negotiable. So just imagine you have a phone call with your CEO booked into your diary. Okay? I can't expect you're going to be too busy to take that phone call that day, hopefully not. So I want you to treat it in the same way. That's in your diary, it's a non-negotiable. Whatever happens, that's going to happen that day. Now, to make it realistic, you do need to make sure that you put it in for a time of day where you are not likely to get pulled off in another direction. So you might want to put it in first thing, because very first thing, everyone's doing their emails and kind of planning their own day, that no one's going to get in touch with you so quickly, so you can do that first thing. Or you might, for example, want to do it on a Friday afternoon, because your emails might be a bit quieter then. So you know your diary best, find a time that's realistic, and make sure you're only plotting it in for 30 minutes. While I sneeze? No. So, for example, you might have something that is actually sort of 2 hours worth of work. So something that's quite a big chunk of your time to spend. If that's the case, what we want to do is break it up. So you may have heard the term, it's very much an American term, how do you eat an elephant? So we eat an elephant one bite at a time. We can't just take an elephant and think, right, I'm gonna get through that one. Whereas when we have this big task on your list, if you have quite a large task, it's going to take you a few hours. If it's on your to-do list, then you'll probably look at it and think, oh, I can't do that today, and you won't do anything. So what we want to do instead is break up that task into something smaller, so something you can do. So let's say you've got building your exposure down on your objectives. What can you do this week? You can make a plan of 6 people that you're going to try and do something to improve your relationship with over the course of the next couple of months. Then next week, you can start messaging them, start scheduling some lunches, scheduling in some coffees, looking at some ways that you might be able to help them out. So you just want to take a manageable 30-minute chunk out of your action and put it right into your diary right now. If you haven't done it, please do it now. Because if you're coming off this call, you're going to feel a lot less motivated to do this as soon as you open up your emails and start your day. Okay, so some things that I would share with you in terms of helping you overcome those barriers, or things that are going to help you with building out that career plan in particular. The first one is finding a mentor. You've probably heard this advice and then thought, how do I get one though? So mentors are brilliant. These are people who have essentially been down the same road as you. They're usually sort of a few years ahead. They've faced kind of similar challenges and they've worked their way through them. So they're there to give you advice on what they would do. And it's really useful to have as a sounding board and somebody who's not emotionally invested in some of the things that we get caught up on when we're looking at our own careers. So how do you find a mentor? There are some actual schemes for this. So for example, you can sign up to iWin and ICANN, they have a scheme. At the CII do some mentoring, those in the Lloyd's market, they do a programme once a year. As well. So there's several kind of structured schemes, but you don't have to do it that way. And in fact, you don't have to take it that formally at all. What you can do is just look for somebody in the market that you look up to. So it could be just somebody that you've met in your own business or someone you've met at a networking event who you just think, oh, I kind of like what they say and I get where they're coming from. Send them a message and just say, hey, I'd love it if you could share some advice with me over something that I'm going through that I reckon you've been through before. Can we go for a coffee? Can we go for a lunch? Just send them a message and schedule that. And then when you're there, ask them some questions. What would you do? What do you think about this? Do you think I'm handling this right? We all love being asked our opinion. Everybody does. So if you take somebody out for a coffee and you ask them their opinion, they're going to share that with you. And that is essentially a mentor. You can then label them a mentor. You can say, would you like to be my mentor? No, but you don't have to put it as a label in order for them to be your mentor. It's just somebody you go to for advice. So if you find that a little bit uncomfortable, hey, can remember some of my apprentices, when they were first asking somebody to be their mentor, they kind of felt like it was like asking somebody out on a date, because you kind of have that fear of rejection. The reality is they're always going to say yes, because it is an honour. Okay? People want that. So as long as you're asking for somebody who's just a few years ahead, time they might say no. So if you go right to the top of your organisation, they're probably mentoring enough people at that stage who haven't got capacity. But people a couple of years older than you, they're going to be so flattered. They absolutely will. But if you don't want to ask, just ask them for advice and just set up those calls and have them as and when you need that advice, and you'll get that support. Okay, so I want to just highlight to you something to plan in as you're doing this career mapping piece. So when you're doing your career planning, we quite often are very good at focusing on the technical job. So I know, as I see the names of you coming in here, we've got people at all different stages in your career. Those of you that are quite early on, what you're going to find is your first promotion and probably your second promotion predominantly comes through doing a good job. So if you are processing, the promotion will come from processing well, low error rate, being able to get through and be consistent at meeting those deadlines. So that's you being able to kind of do the job. Second job, you might find the same thing happens again, but as soon as we get past that, it's a lot less about the job. What I mean by that is kind of everybody's doing the job, but because we go up in a hierarchy, there are less jobs available each stage we go up. So doing the job no longer becomes enough to do the next job and the next job, because you're competing against more people. So absolutely, you have to do the job. But there is a more important aspect here, which is often one that gets neglected, and that's essentially around your image and your exposure. So if you've been on my sessions before, you'll have heard me talk about PI. So PI is essentially the theory of how we get promoted. It's something Inga Bill talks about a lot when she does career talks. Really helped her in terms of making sure she stood out and came across as credible, got her into that kind of first female CEO role at Lloyds. So PI is essentially performance, which we're going to tick off, and we're going to assume we're doing that. Okay. Image and exposure is where we're going to focus a little bit more. So your image is essentially your brand. What are people saying about you when you're not in the room? You want that to be a really positive reputation, where people are seeing you as credible. And ideally, you almost want people to get you muddled up with somebody who already is doing their next job up. So if somebody says to you, oh, I thought you were doing that, or then that's going to help you in terms of giving that perception you're already ready to be the level above. But when it comes to your image, this is going to be really about your behaviours and your communication and your attitude. So what are you giving out as a perception to people? So you might do the job really well, okay, but what are you like in terms of engaging other people with you? Being solution focused, making sure you've got a positive attitude when things are going wrong. You can absolutely go and moan to your friends, but to the people that you're still establishing the brand with, keeping it positive. Making sure you've got good listening skills, that you're comfortable on the phone as well as on email, and different modes of communication. That you're engaging with company initiatives, you're turning up to town halls, you're going to networking events, you're engaging on LinkedIn. So different ways that you can give that image a credibility. We often use that phrase, dress for the job you want. And when we talk about image, I look at this more like act for the job you want. So if you can see people in the job above you, and you see how they behave, you want to try and emulate some of their behaviours. So if they are speaking up in meetings, you want to speak up in meetings. If they are responding to the chain emails where everyone's asking for ideas, you want to do the same. If they're turning up to these events, you want to turn up to those events. At the same time, you do still need to be you. So you don't want to turn up and try and be them, but the things that they are doing, the actions they are taking, then that's where we want to try and look at those good role models and learn from their behaviours. So that's image. But the most important piece is exposure. Exposure is huge. In fact, 60% of the reason we get promoted, the research says, is down to exposure. I think that gets more important the more senior you get, from where we look at the insurance market. Absolutely. But it is going to be the most crucial section when you're looking at those kind of further advancements. This is essentially about who knows you. So we use that phrase, it's who you know. It's not who you know, it's who knows you. Because you want people to be talking about you when you're not in the room. Such a compliment when you see someone that said, oh, I was talking about you the other day. Fantastic, great, they're talking about you. You're getting exposure without even being there. So you want to make sure people within your organisation and externally know who you are, know what you're about. That when you turn up to a meeting, they're hearing from you. One of the sessions later this week is all going to be about speaking up in meetings, and another one's going to be on enhancing your network. So those two sessions we're going to focus on how you do this quite a bit more. I just want to really emphasise why it's so important here. So as you progress, there will be certain opportunities that come up on your CV that look good on your CV, they give you great experience. They might be things like travel opportunities, getting involved in certain projects or work streams or market initiatives. And when you have these types of things, what you see is you often have been asked to join them. You don't see in an organisation often a big advertisement for a work stream. Who wants to apply for this? Who wants to get involved? Because the time taken to select the people is going to be hugely time consuming, and if that time was spent in the work stream, it would probably have a bigger impact. So what you tend to see is people putting sort of sounders out, often asking people at the heads of the business to nominate people in their area of the business. And that head of department will put forward people who they simply think are going to say yes, that want to do it. Because they're looking for a quick answer. They're not going to want to go back to the team and say, right, got this opportunity, and I think you have no interest in this, but I'm going to try and persuade you to do this. They're going to go to the easy option, which is, the person over there that told me in their appraisal, they want to get involved in types of projects. This is perfect, I can give them this. So you need to be voicing, particularly to your line manager and your line manager's manager, that you want to get more involved in things outside of your job. Any kind of initiatives you want to be asked, and see if there's anything that you can actually engage with. So when you do those types of things, it's going to look great on your CV, but also just reputation-wise, it's going to give you a much stronger reputation within the organisation. So the business is going to know who you are and what you're about, and you're going to have connections across different departments. When you go for a promotion, which I imagine when we went back to the goal setting was one of the main things lots of you wrote down, when you want a promotion, your manager has to agree, but it's not your manager's decision. Your manager's manager and your manager's manager's manager, probably a couple of people in HR, and then maybe a bit of benchmarking across different lines of business in different departments in the organisation, they're all going to agree. Because it has to be benchmarked. What you can't have in an organisation is one manager who's very generous at giving people promotions really quickly, and 10 managers that aren't, and then you have people looking around thinking that's not fair. Okay, so it has to be fair, it has to be consistent. Which means more people will have a say in your promotion than you might necessarily think. And the more those people know about you, the easier it is for that promotion to go through. So if we work in the world of risk, you often talk about known risks after unknown risks. Hey, this is the same for you. You want to be a known risk. You want people to know what you're about and be like, oh, well, I know that they're good. I know that they turn up to things. I know that they always put in extra effort and they get involved in things. And that's going to help with your business case, with that experience that you've gained on those work streams as well, but also the conversation and people being on board with who you are. So exposure is incredibly important. So if you've gone back to your actions and you were jotting down how are you going to do this, okay, I would really encourage you to look back at that and think about how you can gain exposure internally or externally or both. It's going to help you with that too. It's really worth having relationships outside of departments. This is one of the advantages people get on graduate schemes. So when you're on a graduate scheme, because you rotate across the business, the graduates tend to know people in HR incredibly well as the time they spent in underwriting, the time they spent in claims, the time they spent in actuarial, so all the different variations they've got, which means that they can understand that business and they have different people to go to for different things. Whereas if you join the organisation in an entry role on your own, or if you've just joined that organisation a few years into your career and you never had that kind of induction, you have to go extra to work out who those relationships can be with. And my advice is always do them for people who are receptive and looking to do it too. So it's a bit of a win-win when you meet. And you'll find those people at the networking events. So those people that turn up to the internal networking events are there to also increase their network. And you see them say, do you know what? I'd love to find out more about your department. We should go for a coffee sometime. And then you set that up afterwards. So you start building out a wider pool of people around the organisation. Okay. Come to the end of what I was going to go through today, so I will answer any questions if anyone's got any you want to send through. And then over the next couple of days, we're going to do half an hour each morning. We're going to look next at saying no to non-promotion work. So that's essentially when if any of you have the barrier of you don't have enough time, if you then go and look at your diary, you want to have a look at what you've said yes to that maybe you didn't have to. Maybe somebody else in the team could have. Maybe it was somebody else's turn. That tends to be things like birthday cards or writing up the minutes or whatever it might be, depending on the stage in your career. So we'll have a look at that tomorrow. And we're going to have a look at speaking up in meetings and also networking as well. So I have got time for a few questions if anyone's got anything they want to jot in there. And what we'll do as well, this will be shared onto our page after the session, so you can go back and re-watch it, where I went through all those coaching questions. I know a few of you came in after that actually, but we went through a load of self-coaching questions at the beginning, so if you want to watch this back, you can go through that. And in fact, if you do this, in a few weeks' time, if you've ticked off that goal, you can come back to it again with a new goal. Excellent, you're very welcome, Sophie. Pay negotiation, will that be part of next week's agenda? I'll tell you what, should we talk about it a bit now? Let's do it now, we can do that as the question. So, pay negotiation is always going to be sensitive for you. Pay is very personal, so it's going to feel sensitive for you. What this means is often when you go into that conversation, I'm certainly speaking from my own experience, but I'm sure a few of you have been here, you go in feeling quite sort of worked up for the conversation. Okay, so you're going to go in and ask, essentially, can I have a pay rise? And there's a lot that then comes out with that kind of, sort of intense kind of feeling inside you for the conversation that makes it quite a challenging conversation. And what I mean by that is that you're going in having prepared for this conversation, having thought about it, probably having rehearsed it and explained to other people why you think you should have a pay rise. But your manager is going in pretty unaware of what that conversation is going to look like. So it's quite a difficult conversation because you're often expecting some kind of response then, and your manager isn't prepared for the conversation, so they of course can't promise you anything then. So first thing I'm going to recommend for you is to have a conversation with your manager that's not about pay. Instead, it's about progress. So you go to your manager and you say, hey, look, I've been looking at my career planning. Blame it on me. So I went on this live, we were looking at this session and I've been thinking about my career path and I'm really keen to get a good idea of what my progression is going to look like and what I should be working towards. Okay. So you start that conversation off. So there's a bit of transparency and a bit of a kind of shared goal when you're not asking them for anything. At this stage, you're just saying to them, I'd love to know more and what you think I can be doing or what actions you think I should be taking to show that I'm ready for that progression. So we're using the word progression still. Because managers can absolutely help you progress. That's within their autonomy. They can say, okay, let me give you this bigger client. Let me give you this higher level of authority. Of course, they need to go through a process there, but really that's down to the manager. There's more they can do. When it comes to asking for pay, your manager can't agree there. Your manager, again, will need to go to their manager's manager, go to HR, who may tell them that there's a process and you've got to wait until April and you have to fill in these forms and you have to compare it against the other people in the team and all of this other stuff that needs to happen but is essentially outside of your manager's control. So that makes it frustrating to talk to your manager about what you want. Okay? Because essentially they can't say yes, not there and then. So what you want to do is have this first conversation about progression and then say, okay, great, I'm going to be working towards, can we have really transparent conversations where you're telling me what you think I should and shouldn't be doing, I'm telling you how I think it's going and we can work towards things together, okay? Not asking them for anything at this stage. Once you've got that relationship going where there's a little bit more comfort and reassurance about talking about careers, that's when you can start talking really about pay. Because if you go in before you've got that kind of trust and kind of sort of norm of having those conversations, it's harder for your manager to feel like they can tell you what you want to hear without making promises they can't keep. So the way we ask for this is to prepare it as a business plan. When you go for a promotion, your request will go through these different channels and be approved by people who don't potentially know who you are, right? They might have an idea of you, but they might not really understand what you do in your job. You might be one of 15 people that have gone through for a pay rise request that month, and they've got to decide who should and shouldn't get one then. So what you want to do is the business case for them. So when you're looking at the business case, some questions for you, if you've got your pen and paper, okay? So I want you to just maybe write these down as questions. If you can't come up with the instant response, you might want to think about the response, but again, I'll save this session so you can rewatch this. What is it you offer the company? Question 1. So how do you add value for the company? How is that answer different to the junior members of your team? So what we're looking to avoid there is you saying, I'm really helpful, I'm really good with the clients, and things that really lots of people could say. How are you different to the junior members? Then how are you different to your peers? So let's say you're an underwriter and you're looking for a pay rise. They're going to be benchmarking you against the other underwriters, not just in your team, but across different lines of business. What are you doing that's different for them? And I'll link this back to the image and the exposure piece. What are you getting involved in? Now, once you've got that answer, how can you make it more commercial? By commercial, we're talking about really either bringing more money in, so what clients have you gained, what business have you expanded, or saving money, what processes have you improved, saving time. Okay. So saving time to make things quicker and easier for the business. So you've got commercial value where you're basically saying, me being here has saved the business this much money or earned the business this much money, and look at how much more that is than by pay rise. Okay, that's really what we're trying to get at. So you've got your commercial answer. Then what you want to do is link in any feedback that you've had. So as you get feedback from people in the organisation, you want to record it so that when you have conversations like this, you're not trying to pull it out. So I recommend saving somewhere, just having a folder where you restore all of the kind of really good feedback that's constructive, of things that you probably will forget when it comes to sort of 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line, and you're trying to pull all this together. So what feedback have you had, and then how can you evidence it? So what evidence have you got that you're adding that value? How can you make sure that you can say that those clients and that success is attributed to you? And what you're essentially doing with this is creating a business case that means that your manager has the facts that they need to put it forward. But do be aware of how the process works in your organisation. So if pay rises only happen twice a year, it's really worth you knowing that, because you want to make sure you're asking at the right times of year, and when someone's telling you no, you can't have one now, you know and you understand how that fits in. And this is where internal mentors are quite useful, or just asking, just say, what are the processes? Because generally businesses are reasonably transparent about this. They want to manage people's expectations, but you just want to make sure you're asking and getting that information in ahead of time before you're putting in your request. Okay, hopefully that was helpful there. If you've got any more specific questions on that conversation, let me know. You can send me them in the Q&A as well, and I think then you can make them anonymous if you ask him. Cool, no worries. All right, we're coming to the end of today's session. I can see a couple of you just coming in. It's going to be saved, so we'll post this up on the page and you can run through it. And those of you that were in it, because we went through a lot of coaching questions, so rewatch it. And then we're going to do this each morning this week between 9 and 9:30. So send me any questions you've got that you want us to cover during the sessions or in advance if you'd like. And if there's any topics that you'd like me to cover that we're not going through this week, let us know as well, because I think we will sort of schedule these fairly regularly. We're doing a lot more this week because it's International Women's Week, so we'll put a lot more support out there this week, but we'll certainly make these a regular thing. All right, well, have a good morning, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow.